The ordinance requires private streets to have a 50-foot right-of-way and a 24-foot cartway. The driveway accesses have not been provided with 24-foot cartways. Mr. Brown.
I believe the ordinance says that a private lane must be 10 feet wide, to have a 10-foot wide cartway. And I believe the facility the way it is now satisfies that requirement.
Do you have your subdivision land development ordinance with you? Go to the Appendix 1. Infrastructure specifications, page 9, private lanes. Appendix 1 is the design specifications in the center of the ordinance. Center of the ordinance.
I'm looking at, I wasn't following you, I was looking up section 3.11.6. But
Well, that's where I'm at. Yeah.
It's part of Appendix 1.
That's Appendix 1. You have it?
No, I don't.
There it is. 311.1. First of all, this whole section, as the board is aware, because we do have several private lanes in the township, is referring to residential private lanes, where we have homes that share a common driveway. You can see, if you look further down, 311.4, it's talking about private lane, subdivision plan, house numbers for dwellings. But if there is a way that you can construe this to apply it to a commercial driveway, go up to the first paragraph, 311.1. A private lane as defined by this ordinance may be permitted. And I'll take you back to the definitions at the beginning of the ordinance. Page 4, you turn back all the way back to the beginning of the ordinance under definitions. Go to F under 300, all the way to the beginning. Right before that is E. The word shall and will are always mandatory. The word may is permissive. And the authority to grant somebody a private lane status rests with the Board of Supervisors. I've never heard of anybody coming in here and trying to call a commercial driveway a private lane before. So,
Where's commercial lane defined?
Get in there. Oh, here it is, page 32.
What?
The front portion, not the design standard. You want it? Driveway, site, ingress and egress. commercial and industrial ingress egress driveways shall be designed, and it goes through a optimum visibility, but go down to number 2, under site ingress and egress. The last sentence. Driveways shall be constructed consistent with requirements delineated in Appendix 1 of this ordinance, which is the design standards. So any type of commercial or industrial ingress or egress is subject to the design standards.
But Appendix 1 is what you first took me to, correct?
That's right, but the private lane is a waiver. Private lane is a waiver mechanism for the board to grant a waiver to Appendix 1 in the case of a residential property that's served by one private lane for several homes.
Where's the standards for determining what's a private lane and a commercial lane? It's just whatever the board considers. Is that the standard?
Here's what I'm saying to you. Even if you construe a private lane to mean a commercial or industrial driveway, this is still an avenue for a waiver. This is not a mandatory thing where you can come in and say, we want to call our driveway a private lane, therefore we don't have to comply with the ordinance.
No, I don't think that's what we're asking. I just want to make the record clear. Waiver number 4, the specific requirement that we're asking to be stricken or waived is dealing with section 3.3.
Well, it says, the literal compliance with this provision would be unreasonable and cause undue hardship where section 3.3 does not apply to a private lane for section 3.1.
Right, and then you're saying a private lane is not a private lane unless you determine it to be a private lane.
To use that definition would require the board to grant a waiver, and that basically is a residential waiver that we could grant.
I don't see in section 3.1 where it makes, the 3.11, where it makes a difference between different types of development. I thought it just pertained to just private lanes.
Private lane, as defined by this ordinance, may be permitted. May. Go back to the definitions.
Okay, and then what is the standard for determining whether something may be a private lane or not be a private lane?
Well, if it doesn't conflict with anything else in the ordinance clearly addresses commercial and industrial driveways.
And I mean, what's the criteria? What's the standard?
Private lane I would consider to be a residential access, which
And
we have several of them in the township.
And is that's not stated in this ordinance, though? I just want to make that clear.
No, and if it did say a private lane is defined by this ordinance shall be permitted, you would have an argument. But that's not what the ordinance says.
Okay, that's fine.
So basically, are you asking us to consider this a private lane? Is my question.
We're just asking for relief from this 50-foot cartway requirement.
The engineer, maybe Button.
You mean the 24-foot car with 50-foot right-of-way requirement?
Right, the 24-foot cartway, paved cartway, yes.
That's kind of up to your guys' discretion. It's, like you said, it's may be permitted. The 24 is not, I don't think, an unreasonable width for a commercial driveway.
It's probably already 24 foot now, the driveway, but I think what they're really asking for is not to pave it, is what I'm getting out of that. Is that correct?
I don't believe so.
No, we're just asking for the different cartway. Should not be less than 10 feet instead of it having to be 24 foot. That's what it says. The required width of the cartway should not be less than 10 feet per private lane for section 3.11.6. Element will keep post 50-foot right away. We're just asking for relief from the 24-foot cartway.
I'm sorry, can I go, what was this section that defines commercial driveways?
So page 32.
Yeah, 32.
I think number 6 is where we come to the pavement issue.
So let me ask you this, what is the problem with 24-foot wide? That's probably already pretty close to that.
Do you know what it is now?
Got to be at least 20, 22.
Have you ever had two vehicles pass on it?
Yeah.
So that's already that wide. What would be the reason to ask for a waiver? The 50-foot just the right of way.
And we have that.
And you already got 50-foot right of way.
Do you know the actual?
I thought that's what I'm looking at the plan. I think it was actually surveyed, and it is less than.
I don't think they need one.
Okay, can we go on to number 5? I don't know that you really need a waiver on that.
Well, we have the site plan right here.
Yeah, I think that the nature of the private lane is that if you do have somebody coming off an individual home and it's accessing your house, when you have commercial, when you need vehicular traffic. But Raj, I think the testimony was that you, or Chelsea, you said that they can maneuver on that road.
Yeah, I've been in my car while the truckers.
Okay, so it more than likely exceeds the 10 feet.
I don't believe it's exactly 24 foot the whole way down.
Well, no, I think if you need a waiver from that, the board would consider, I think, a few feet in terms of being able to have vehicular access up and down. I mean,
You know, another concern that I have with this is, we're thinking of the next construction station is if there is an emergency out there, we're going to move two vehicles in and out of there.
Right.
It would have to be that wide. Fire trucks and whatever else might need to get in and out, ambulances, who knows? I mean, I don't know what could go on, but let's just think of the worst case scenario. It may be needed, to be that wide to let those people go in and out of it.
And there's, currently we have two-way traffic on there that's possible. It's just, I don't believe we'd meet the 24 foot the whole way down the driveway, and we don't want to be out of compliance with you guys, you know?
can somebody just check on that and see what that is? If Chris can't tell. Plans.
Yeah, is this something, do you want to focus more on the pavement issue at this point? And then if we're fine with the 25?
Okay, Chris, can I ask?
I don't see that this is a big issue. Can we move on to number 5?
I just want to ask one more thing, Chris.
Yeah.
Could two vehicles pass each other the whole distance?
She said that,
I don't know, I haven't run into, I don't go there like that often, so I don't know that every
I was
time
out there
can have someone
4
pass.
days in a row, and I don't remember having.
because
I remember having-
I have, like Russ brought up, I have a concern that if we do have, looking at that last episode we had, where they had all these vehicles parked into the entrance and trying to get into the drill site, like Russ had said, that we have to get ambulances out, that we're going to be bottlenecked going up through there. So that's a concern I have, and maybe you guys can address that later on.
Okay. Can I ask the engineer a question? Is there anything about emergency vehicle access in any kind of code?
I'm not sure if there is a your code or not, but I think that's a valid concern that you have. And one of
No
the reasons
variety state code, perhaps?
I have to check.
Okay. If you would.
Yeah, that's probably what it is.
We talking Washington Road?
Mhm.
Okay, let's go on to number 5. I think that starts to get us on that too. So why don't you go ahead and discuss that and Washington Road there if you want. Mr. Brown.
I think, well, this could be really answered by Williams and Lormont Midstream with regards to past submittals. I can't really testify to that, but I think that's the substance of this waiver is they're deeming that the township road has been granted access, occupancy has been granted, and that they are currently working on the PennDOT occupancy permit.
When the township road access was granted, what was the proposed
Gas well drill.
gas well drilling?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the problem with coming in and getting a permit for the dew point control facility for that Washington Road?
You don't really ever,
I mean, I think it's only $45 or something.
Is that a township permit?
I mean, Atlas got one for the drilling, for the access for the drilling, but that's specifically only for the gas well drilling.
Well, I mean, that's testimony, I mean, that's an opinion. But duly noted.
I mean, is there an issue with just coming in and getting a permit for Washington Road?
Well, there has been for every other permit we've applied for. Everything from the check hasn't been accepted to, I don't know what the specific reason was on this one.
If it's a minor access and that was the concern, was the site distance, I'm sure the board would consider. I mean, I don't see a problem. Do you see a problem with Washington Road? I don't see a problem. I don't want to grant a waiver. I'd prefer they just come in and got the proper permit for it. And if there was a site distance issue, just ask us for a waiver on the site distance. I don't see that there's a problem there at all. Okay. So, on number 6, please. Mr. Brown, go ahead.
Ordinance says that the private drive must have a mud-free, dust-free surface, and then, that's per the ordinance, and then it says, plans indicate that the surface is gravel, the driveway surface must be paved. And we were arguing that, or are arguing that, a gravel surface is a mud-free, dust-free surface, or at least dust suppressants can be applied. I guess the way we read the ordinance, it doesn't state that the drive must be paved, it just says that it must be mud-free and dust-free.
Can I just point out one? Now, and when we were discussing, I believe it was waiver number 4 in the 50-foot right-of-way and the 24-foot cartway of section 3.3, and we said that we should not be a private lane under section 3.11. I'd just like to note, and you said that that determination is made by this board, that under this comment, your engineer says under section 3.11.6, the private lane provisions, that the driveway service must be paved. So I just wanted to note that little contradiction that you can have. This section applies in certain instances, but in other instances it doesn't. And I would just like to point out that under section 3.11.6, which we're asking a waiver from, the ordinance provision does not require pavement.
Yeah. If I comment, it's not in the specific waiver, but the section that does pertain to paving of commercial and industrial access drives is actually section 6.2, which is just a little bit past that 3.11 section.
Right, in your comment letter, you pointed to section 3.11.6.
Because that's the specific comment that you're responding to, but I think that this comes up several times in the report. But in any case, section 6.2 says that commercial and/or industrial lot development shall be undertaken in accordance with all applicable requirements contained herein, referring to the Appendix 1 Infrastructure Improvement and Development Specifications.
I'm sorry, can you, what comment are you
You're talking about
pointing
section
to?
6.2.
And what comment in your comment letter?
Give me a minute here.
Just so everybody understands, just because the engineer goes through and makes a comment on every possible part of the ordinance doesn't mean that the board considers it to be applicable all the time. If somebody came in here with a residential application, had 3 homes, and wanted to share a single driveway, the board would probably grant them this waiver. It's just very unusual for a commercial applicant to come in here and try to get us to grant a waiver and consider it a private lane.
I think that, well, confusion from an engineering standpoint is private drive was mentioned in the comments. And so we were going with, it was called a private drive,
Well,
so.
just so you're aware, Tom, I don't remember his last name. From
Woodrow.
Woodrow from Kleinfelder, and Andy Benchek, and 2 gentlemen from Lennon Smith and Solar that got together in December sometime. And this was all discussed, and they understood when they left here what was required. I mean, exactly these same issues were discussed months ago.
It's, do you have the letter, November 19th, page 13? And it's item 29I. It's not specific to paving, so I understand the confusion, but it requires that all improvements be constructed in accordance with the construction standards, section 6.1.
What is 6?
That's all the paving details, inlets, roadways, slope requirements.
So 6.1 applies in one instance. Are you saying that section 3.11 doesn't apply? Seems like it's one or the other, not both.
I guess it would depend on whether the board determined that the private lane was deemed a private lane.
So you're the engineer who comments on the ordinance, and we're supposed to satisfy your comments, but you're not sure
Well, I think
which
so.
ordinance sections apply. Is that right? Because you have to find out what
In
the
the case of
board
the private
thinks.
lane, correct.
Okay.
And I think the your application was perceived, as we've gone over, as a waiver to allow that private lane. So, and I haven't spoken to the engineer outside of here, but seemingly what you're saying is if the board dealt with the private lane, that would be applicable, and you read a separate section, if it's a commercial road, then that section 6.1 would be applicable. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think the confusion partially, John, was that it's a statement. It says the ordinance requires the private drive to have a mud-free, which means he's deeming it a private drive. And in another case, it was a requirement that goes to what Brian says is his opinion is a commercial. So there's contradictory
Right, and
conclusions here.
I understand how you read that, and I don't disagree with that it looks dissimilar. But again, that's sort of the purpose of these hearings through the Planning Commission, through this public hearing, that we sort of figure that all out in terms of how the board is going to look at that. But in fairness to the applicant, you do see sections, and the only thing my only answer, again, without sitting down with the engineer, is what he said, that if they did grant this private lane, he has to address what the private lane specs look like. If he doesn't, then there's a different section, so.
I understand that, but these are responses, these are notices of deficiencies, so their conclusion's already drawn.
I appreciate your
It
comments.
doesn't make sense, just for the record. So you're trying to apply two different standards, and so that's inherently,
But
I
again,
think you gotta make a decision.
I think the engineer put in that position, not knowing what this board's going to do on the waiver side of the world, he's got to address both instances. But that could have been pointed out more clearly.
Okay, anyway.
In your experience, how many commercial or industrial sites are granted a waiver for not paving, doing something with the surface?
I've never had an experience with that.
And I'd just like to say that I don't, as long as I've been on this board, I've never had an experience.
How many compressor stations or dew point control facilities have you approved?
I don't approve.
Or have you considered in that range of broad experience?
Me personally,
Yeah.
just this one.
Okay, so
I'm
by
not-
saying
I'm
you've
not
never
sure
come
if it-
across it isn't really considered for
He asked
context.
about commercial and industrial developments. So.
Okay, but that's pertinent to the type, it's specific to the type, just to put it in context. One thing I'd like to point out, John and Brian, before we go any further, I know you said it, but it was for the first one, and I don't want to drag us back too far, but when you had a concern that there might be some precedential effect to granting a waiver, and I just wanted to say on the record that a waiver by its very nature is case-specific, so the second waiver would take into account everything prior to it, so that really shouldn't be a concern. Sorry to drag us back.
Any other board members have any opinions on this private lane issue? Mr. Nicer?
I still think this is a commercial operation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little confused here because
What's that?
this is a commercial site, industrial site? Is that the heading we're putting on it, commercial industrial? Is that what it is? But you want us to differentiate because it's the first of your kind.
No, what I'm
Well,
saying
that's
is,
basically what you said.
no, it's not.
Yes, it is. You asked him how many he's ever dealt with, he said this is the only one, and you said then it goes by type.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
What I'm
that's what you
saying,
said.
no, what I'm saying
Oh,
is
okay.
that on the private, we were told in the comments it was deficient because a private lane should have the following things. And so the application was applied by him, not us. So I'm saying, in one case, you're saying it's private, the other you're saying it's commercial, so we need guidance.
I would like, if I might, I can just reel this back in. The waiver number 6 deals with section 3.11.6. The comment is the ordinance requires the private drive to have a mud-free, dust-free surface. And it cites to section 3.11.6. Status, the plans indicate a gravel surface. The driveway surface must be paved. And our point is, section 3.11.6 does not require pavement. That's it.
Right, and I think Dan addressed that. I believe you did.
I guess I'm going to go back to the beginning of the section that you keep quoting. A private lane may be permitted.
Right.
Okay, it is not mandatory, it is not shall. It's in the discretion of the Board of Supervisors.
And I asked you for what the standard is that you use in your
The
discretion.
standard that we would use, is it residential or is it commercial?
And that's
That goes back to
enunciated where in the
And
ordinance?
that goes back to Mr. Vicer's point.
Right, it's not enunciated anywhere in the ordinance.
I think the rest of that section speaks to the residential application of it.
And not only that, commercial industrial is very frequently mentioned in the ordinance.
And can you just let the record reflect that these are all interpretations being made of the ordinance?
Sean, may I ask that I consider this a commercial facility. I also concerned about getting emergency vehicles in and out. Okay, so that's what I'm addressing, that I'm concerned about. And it's going to be there for 25 years, and you're going to have heavy equipment in and out of there constantly. You're going to have trucks coming in there, picking up the frack water.
It's not us.
I know, but I'm saying, but they're going to use that road.
No,
None?
we don't know.
Okay.
You're gonna have what, trucks coming in taking out condensate?
It happens once a week, maybe.
Yes.
I guess as a supervisor, I cannot get to calling this a private lane. We have them in the township, they're named, I know what they are, we've done them before. So personally, I can't get there.
That's fair enough. I mean, we have it covered in the record. That's fine.
I don't know how the other supervisors feel about it, but
So does Laurel Mountain have any thoughts on paving this to just get rid of the waiver?
okay, let's move on to number 7 now. The ordinance requires the depth of the lots not to be greater than 2.5 times the width of the lot. The proposed depth of the lot is greater than 2.5 times the proposed width.
That's, I mean, it just is.
Can you, Mr. Brown, could you tell me how much difference there is?
Well, I'm confused by this, and you know, when you finished your statement, I wanted to say, and it's an existing facility. What's the purpose of these dimensions? If we can't, they don't comply. It is the way it.
Well, what I'm asking you is that they are here for subdivision. So how far out of compliance is it, is what I'm asking.
I haven't quantified that.
You need to take me there. You need to take the board here and say, well, it's not that far out, or it's really far out of compliance. I guess that's what I'm asking. We can't, I don't know. So
Does that weigh in your decision how far it is?
if it's close, yeah, it would weigh in my decision.
What if it's far out?
I don't know.
If it's far out, then do we deconstruct and construct it to meet these compliance?
Depths of the lots. Wouldn't that go back to the actual subdivision, the layout of the subdivision? That's all it would, you see where I'm going with this. It may just be a matter of moving a line on the subdivision, but if it's close, I want to know. What I'm saying is I'm not adverse to granting something like
Sure.
that, but I need to know the facts on exactly how far out is it.
Okay.
Okay, we're not, I don't think that,
Yeah.
we realize it's an existing facility, we granted a variance, it's there, so, you know.
It would be more than just moving a line. Thered be additional surveying.
Well, no, if you could just come back to the board and say, well, it's only
Quantify the amount.
30
Sure.
feet out, or,
We'll do that.
that's all. That's all. I think the board would not have an issue with that. Number 8. Ordinance requires sidewalks along public streets or other locations deemed necessary by the township. All sidewalks must be ADA accessible. Sidewalks have not been provided along public streets. Mr. Lukina? We have no problem with that. Number 9, ordinance requires water service for the proposed subdivision. Documentation of water services available for the subdivision has not been provided. You know there's no public water out there, so any thoughts from our engineer on that?
No. That's up to your discretion, really.
Chris, do you know the basis as to why you would need, if at all, water on site? For any applications?
You wouldn't be able to use it for fire suppression or anything like that, so there's really no need for it.
What about, you talked before about dust control suppression.
We wouldn't really use water because when I asked for like the departments, it's a good, I think you use more like.
Speak up.
Yeah, something.
Cap, can you speak up? You're dropping your voice. here.
Oh, I'm sorry. You wouldn't, where do you want me to start at?
Just start at the beginning.
Okay. We wouldn't really need water on site because you can't use it for fire suppressant or anything like that. And then he asked about using
Dust
it for
control.
dust control, and I said, well, you wouldn't really want to use water because it'd dry as fast as you put it out there, so you'd probably use something made for that specific purpose for dust control, and he said magnesium.
Magnesium.
Do you know whether anything's been utilized at the site to date for dust control?
No,
Does
no.
anybody?
I don't.
I don't, I mean, I drove on it all summer and I didn't really see a huge.
So there's no need for water if you have a worker that's hurt, or access to water to wash out eyes or anything like that? Or
There's, we have water bottles on site for eye washing and stuff like that and first aid.
Okay.
That is available. Yeah, we have all the first aid stuff out there, yeah.
Okay, number 9, I don't think the board has any issue with that at all. Number 10, the ordinance requires sanitary sewer service for the proposed subdivision. The applicant must submit a planning model for the proposed subdivision.
we talked about this one with someone. Does anyone have anything else to add relative to this? I know we talked about it. Dan or Chris? Sean?
And submitted a waiver request.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if there's anybody who has any comments on 10.
Okay, let's move on to number 11. The ordinance requires defined ingress and egress points shall be required. Provide curb driveway access to define the access points at the state highway.
Any comments on that, Dan?
And that's the requirement of the ordinance, so.
No, if I may, the ordinance states, the waiver we're requesting is section 802.P.1.B, which states defined ingress and egress points shall be required for all commercial industrial development parcels. And our waiver is related to the fact that that ordinance provision does not state or provide curb driveway access.
Is that found in the design standards?
Yes. Because if you refer to that 6.2, requiring that all commercial and industrial development meet these Appendix 1 design standards. And that's where you'll find those curb sections and things of that nature.
The comment doesn't state, it states section 802.P.1.B, doesn't state that section and see this section or that section. I just want the record to reflect that.
I guess Chris or Dan, what would be the benefit or peril of not having curb driveway accesses? I mean, they're obviously in there for design specs for some reason. Dan, do you have a comment on it?
Well, maybe for controlling stormwater would be one of the advantages of having curbed access.
Just off the road? Is that something you'd agree with, Chris?
It is used for that in a more urban setting, but there's plenty of roads out there, a lot of paved roads out there now that don't have that curved access. It just drains out to the side or into a borrowed ditch. So, the stormwater could be addressed without the curb.
Could you address the driveway runoff without the curb?
Yes.
Have you
Have we?
addressed the runoff without the curb? I mean, there's no curb.
Well, we
there.
haven't. It's not a paved road. The way it's been designed now, the way that the plans have laid out, and this plan has been submitted thus far, it's been a gravel access.
How often does that gravel access have to be maintained? I know those roads get pretty beat up. I don't know about you or that there.
I think it really depends on the amount of traffic it has. I mean, it has a lot more traffic right now because Atlas is doing wells, but once they're gone, I mean, it's like a truck a day.
Well, what about the history in terms of upkeep on that road, in terms of, we send our first responders out to a site problem, is the road always readily accessible? Is it in any times in any states of disrepair? I mean,
I've never been out there where I was like, ooh, I'm not going down that road, if that's what you're asking. I mean, I've always felt that the road was well maintained and that I could drive down it and I could walk down it without having to worry about potholes or anything.
is it maintained with snow and
Yeah,
clearance all?
they plow it, yeah.
Okay.
I would say, my opinion is if it's required to be paved, then a
Curbing makes
curb
sense.
is nothing. I mean, that's almost nothing at the end of the driveway. It'd be used for a catch basin.
Right.
No, I don't need it. Okay. Number 12. The ordinance requires the shoulders of the private drives to be graded the entire width of the right-of-way or access easement, minimum of 50 feet. You want to address that?
I think the concern there is to grading that access, you would disturb more land than necessary. I mean, I'm not sure if it's been quantified or not, but just from the general rule, looking out there, there'd be more trees cut down. You would have to, there'd be a lot more earth disturbance in grading that whole 50-foot easement level.
So if they did a 24-foot wide driveway and they did 6 to 8 feet on the sides of the driveway and seeded it with something for erosion control, would that be?
Yeah, I would think that'd be reasonable.
Yeah, I personally don't think it's reasonable to grade that far out from the drive, but see what the other board members feel.
I feel as long as we get two vehicles back and forth.
Well, we're talking about the sides.
Right, sides, I mean, that
Yeah.
would.
Basically, what it would entail is an additional 24 feet of grading, probably around 12 to 14 feet on each side of the
Right.
road, which is a lot. It would disturb a lot. I think maybe the less that's disturbed here would be the.
What's the slope off the road now? What's there?
Off
The existing drive?
off the shoulders of
Yeah.
the drive. I don't know, I don't remember. It's going to vary, I think. I mean, it's been several weeks been out there. No, it's nothing.
Do you know, Chris, whether or not it's been seeded or graded away at all, just for erosion control, just to keep that road intact?
It doesn't go much beyond the gravel access, and then you just run into the natural state of the land of the forested area.
Not much of a fault drop off or anything?
I don't think there's much of a drop off if there is. There's nothing steep.
Okay.
How about, Chris, can there be overgrowth finally because the side's not being maintained, that there be growth would be closing in on the road? Because we have this on some of our township roads where if we don't mow them back, it just stuff keeps growing over and closes in the road. Is there any way to maintain that?
Well, sure, there's going to be maintenance involved with that. And not to speak too much for Laurel Mountain, but being it's a gravel drive, they're assuming access of that. They're going to want to be able to access that property. So yeah, there's going to be more maybe routine maintenance with a gravel driveway or different maintenance associated with the gravel drive versus paved. But I think that is something that they would prefer to do. Right, I see your point. There's going to be some maintenance issues associated with it, but it's feasible for sure. If I could go back to the curved access, is that something that is absolutely necessary? Especially if we go back to, as a stormwater management, curbing in that drive, you're going to funnel and pipe and contain that runoff. And it just would create a larger stormwater management issue with the curb than with, say, a drainage swell.
All right, and I guess that may take us back, Chris, to one of the initial thoughts of what is the stormwater plan there in terms of if you do put those things in, what features are going to be?
Well, that would be different. I mean, that's something that I think we wanted to kind of dress these out holistically, not just look at these
Okay.
two individually, you gotta look at them succinctly together a little bit.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I agree that, you
Hold
know,
on one second, you guys, quarter change.
I agree that, you know, some of these issues hinge together. If you grant the waiver not to pave the roadway, then it doesn't make a lot of sense to have curbs. You know, if you are going to pave the roadway, then that's a different question, so.
And then that'll, I guess, double back to the stormwater management plan.
Well, vice versa, do you think that if the requirement is to pave the road, could it be reasonable to not have to also curb it?
It could be, I think you need to show how you're capturing the runoff, you know, from that area of your driveway.
Like a borrow ditch or drainage swell on the side?
If it's if it's taking your runoff to your detention facility, however that works. But, I mean, again, it has to be, it's up to the supervisors to grant that kind of waiver of not having curb, but.
Okay, you want to go, that was the last one, so let's go through these quickly. First of all, I'd like to ask the solicitor, would it be proper to indicate to the applicants what the board is considering granting and not voting on these waiver requests until we've got the rest of the subdivision land development plan ready for approval?
I think so. I think we're in the public hearing. You're not voting because you can't vote. But I think the applicant, and they can say otherwise, are seeking guidance as to what you at least would know would be problematic and what you don't think is going to be a problem during this hearing. Would that be okay with the applicant?
That'd be fine.
Okay, number one is the stormwater management plan. Mr. Lucchino, what do you feel about that?
I think let's stay with it right now.
Mr. Dyson?
Stormwater management, I agree with what Chris brought up. This whole thing with the paved drive and the water man, it's all going to be tied together.
I agree with staying with our stormwater management ordinance. I am open to, if there are particular areas where you have a problem, the driveway, for example, where that water is coming down towards Bigger Road instead of going back toward the site, if you would come with a alternative for us on that section.
Well, for example, if you curb it, where's that water going to go?
Well, that's exactly my point. We have had applicants come in the past and not want to pipe water. They wanted to put swales in to try to dissipate the water.
Right.
So I'm open to that. But I'm not open to waiving the entire stormwater management ordinance. But I am open to working with you on some aspects of it.
And it seems like the applicant's going to have some stormwater management ideas there. They may not be literal to our ordinance, but you're going to do something to control the water on site. We just want to be part of the conversation, and ultimately, if we can approve it, then we can do that.
Okay, number two, the domestic water distribution system, Mr. Lucchino.
I have no problem with that.
Waiving that? Yeah, we're going to waive that. Number three requires a plan of proposed sanitary sewage system. I need to, I think, spend a little more time with our engineers. I don't really see the reason that Laurel Mountain objects to doing the planning module. Now, when it comes time to actually putting a holding tank or something in, I don't know how that would work.
We'll check on that.
Yeah, I don't know that we would require a holding tank, but we do require the planning module, in my opinion. There's no way that we can grant that waiver for the planning module.
No, because, maybe I'm wrong, I might be, but if they have a facility there and they want to hose it down, the floor, okay, where does that wastewater go?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
You got the facility there, they paint the floor and they want to hose it down, clean up.
No,
Where does that water go to?
we wouldn't do that.
So there's not going to be any type of way to clean up in that rooms at all?
If we have anything like that, we have what's called pig mats, in which case we put that down and that absorbs whatever water or
Okay.
residue or anything is in there. And then we dispose of that with our waste, like our solid waste, how we would do that. We're not going to go out there and water down the site, you know. We want to contain any.
Okay. I'm not really content, just clean up the shop normally. I always thought that you always, had some kind of system in that building, so if we got flooded, heavy rain, something happened, water would run in that building, how would you get that water out of that building?
Well, right now it's gravel, so it would dissipate within the site.
Okay.
It wouldn't like flood. I mean, there's nothing keeping that water in that site. It would dissipate throughout the gravel.
Okay.
I don't mean to be vulgar, I really don't, but you're going to have people out there working for hours at a time. You say it's unmanned, but at some point you even stated there would be maintenance done. I really don't want somebody coming down here saying there's guys out in the woods using the bathroom. I think that's an issue, because we've all sat here in this meeting, we have to take a break. You know, some people went to the bathroom, I mean, we haven't been here that long, but, I mean, do you understand my point?
I do understand your point, and I have been there. I've been there for long periods of time before when we had a shutdown or something like that, or when I was out there with Alex or something like that. And Mousetrap is right at the end of that road, and I drive down there and I'll get a hamburger and use the facilities, or I'll go get gas. I mean, I don't think they're going to go out there and use the forest.
Yeah, I'm not saying that the township's going to require you to put a holding tank in, but you know, it's relatively inexpensive and simple to do that. And we're not going to grant a waiver on the planning budget. I don't see that ever happening.